Welcome to the LocdPop Talks podcast. I am your host, Tyree Wilson. And whether you are a man or a woman who is either married, separated, standing for your marriage, or divorced, this podcast is here to support you. What's up, you guys? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I took a bit of a more than expected break from the podcast. I had a couple things going on, not only with myself, but with the family and with my girls and stuff like that, but nothing crazy, nothing to be alarmed over. I kind of think that as creators and podcasters and whatnot, you come up across a time where you need personal time to yourself and may not intend to take as much time as you do, but it's always good to come back, give some love to yourself and to the grace you need in order to really find yourself, your energy, and to come back going strong. So I wanted to take my own advice, not to really burn out on the podcast or anything like that, which I haven't. I love you guys very much. And so shout out to all the members who have reached out to me over the week. It was eye-opening and it was enlightening to hear how the podcast has helped you, what other questions and topics I could cover. And so as time goes on, I want to get back into doing those things. As far as like content goes, I'm trying to keep up with like maybe once or twice a week as far as podcast episodes go, and it's working out okay. But so if you guys notice there's a change in the upload schedule or anything like that, do not be alarmed. I have not quit on you. I have just nailed down exactly what is going to be an upload schedule from this point forward. But without further ado, why are you guys even here? I want to talk about what it is that I was facing. I noticed a couple other members, men and women, who were restored. For those listeners and those viewers who are not necessarily restored with their spouse, but maybe they're in a good place with them, or they're still working things out in divorce proceedings and stuff like that. But you're taking the time to really work on yourself and really work on your relationship with God and really work on who you are, what you want to do as far as your life goals are concerned. So today's topic, I wanted to talk about what it's like to deal with unresolved issues. So the name of the podcast today is Unresolved Issues, and they will pop up from time to time. You may not be able to work them out so quickly or as quickly as you like, but they do need to be tackled. They need to be addressed. They need to be acknowledged, and you need to have yourself a support system in place with people who will be willing to not only listen to you, but to really go back and forth with you. And you should really have somebody who can give you accountability to how much time you spend with these unresolved issues, because without any type of accountability, they can run you. A lot of Christian men and women, myself included, used to tend to believe that if there was an unresolved issue or a old thought or an old feeling that came up in your mind regarding a relationship between you and your spouse, we like to say that the enemy is attacking us. The enemy is after us. Listen, I've talked about the enemy many times on this podcast, and you guys, am officially done with giving the enemy any more credit to the things that are happening in my life. Now, don't get me wrong. If I feel like there's a situation that drives me to break who I am as a person, and to do foul and jacked up things to other people, like my family, my friends, co-workers, my children, I could get caught up in things. And the same thing could happen to you. The same thing could happen to our spouse. You just kind of get caught up in things. However, old thoughts and old feelings and old actions and behaviors that come up, I am no longer giving those to, I'm not crediting the enemy for any of those things. Simply because when you're standing for your marriage, which is something I had to learn, you guys, I had to learn how to have not only the motivation and to be relentless in my faith and have a bigger heart and growing and laying old ways and behaviors to rest. At some point, no matter where you are in your relationship, you've got to work on your discipline. Your discipline is what you require when there's nothing else going on in the situation. There's nothing else going on between you and your spouse. If you find yourself waiting on God, this is a time for you to hone in on your discipline. So a little, share a part of my story. Me and Tiffany have had the greatest connection in our relationship that I could even remember. I couldn't even remember the last time we've connected so well. However, things to me, my discipline that has waned here and there has me thinking about things being too good, because it was a game that I played. It was a game that she played in our past where the worst things were getting, like underbelly of the relationship, the worse that things were going, the better we tried to present ourselves as if nothing happened, as if nothing was wrong, So, it's a little bit of an update or it's a little bit of an upkeep, put it like that. And it's an upkeep to the relationship that you handle. And people on this platform, guys, if you're not careful, people on this platform will explain to you, like men and women, they will explain to you that if your husband and wife they're the best at connecting with you, they're feeling extra lovey-dovey, they're sending you messages, they're going the extra mile, then you need to be reserved. You need to, deal with them with kid gloves. You kind of have to have yourself in a guarded position, because if they're going hard for you, then chances are they're doing something foul on the back end. That may be true. But what kind of person are you? Like, if you're trying to, especially what we're doing, if you're trying to reconnect who you are as a person, if you're trying to reconnect with your spouse in a way that will have them trust who you are, to give the relationship another chance, you cannot waste your time or your spirit or even your bodily language and your facial expressions approaching them as if you are always guarded. Always be guarded, anybody can figure that out, and you make them uncomfortable, you make yourself uncomfortable, and then what happens at that point? You start turning your own gears to make things worse. Maybe they aren't calling you. So the minute that they stop being all extra lovey-dovey or something like that, or they have a lapse in how often they're doing it, then you start questioning, well, what is it that they're doing? Why aren't they talking like this anymore? Why aren't they mentioning things to me about their day? Why aren't they what's a good one? Like extra comforting to me or something like that. These are the things that's not the enemy. Okay. That's not the enemy. And even if people want to believe in that, then okay, but that's not the enemy. You're worried about losing that scarcity mindset. You're worried about losing any type of connection that your spouse has shared with you, any type of phone calls, emails, text messages, whatever they used to use, because you live in a scarcity mindset. So you bring up unresolved issues. It took me a while to even open up to Tiffany about when I was going through that very same thing. She had become really comfortable with talking to me about her day and her feelings and what she wanted out of life. And the day that she stopped, or the couple days that she stopped, I wanted more of that, because I felt like as long as she was talking to me, then we were having good connection. And so when I didn't feel like I got that from her, well, then I started acting really weird again. I started acting like something was wrong in the relationship. I literally presented myself as if I was trying to disconnect myself and my feelings from my wife. Again, disconnected from people who are not your spouse and a family. There could be a billion reasons as to why you don't do those things. However, this is your spouse, for you guys listening, for the men and women, even if you're not together anymore, this is a person that you share a covenant with. Give them your heart, give them your heart. If you feel like you should be in a guarded position, then get in your guarded position. Guard your heart for now, especially if they're the ones that are trying to tear you down. But when it comes to open communication, when it comes to connecting with them every once in a while, even if they're not around, give your spouse your heart. And so I had to tell myself that, because it's so much easier to tell someone that than to actually do it. And the only way to actually do it is you have to learn to, one, again, like we talked about a few episodes back, is how to set boundaries and how to set standards. Boundaries and standards are not for your spouse. They're for you. To acknowledge your boundaries and your standards, you are then able to communicate the things that you do and do not tolerate in your relationship. And you get to talk about the things that you need. And this goes both ways, for men and for women. For men who feel like they can't speak to their spouse, the biggest boundary that you have not set up, or standard you haven't set up, is the ability to communicate. So fellas, if you feel like you're talking to your wife, have you feeling like you should be afraid of her, if she's not very responsive in a positive way or any kind of way besides negative, to the things that you have on your mind and to the opinions and comments that you want to share, then you really should think about other ways of communicating, or stop with the communication altogether until you, one, have the backbone, or you have the confidence to speak to your wife or your ex-wife or whatever like that. And you're going to have to pray about, one, your confidence and your assurance. And you have to open up about praying for communication and how those things will work out between the both of you. Without communication, guys, without true communication, the ability to open up to one another, there isn't going to be much that you can work with. You can continue to pray, continue to have your arm out, continue to have your heart open and your mind open as well. But if you're not communicating, you've got a big problem. You've got a huge problem, huge problem. And everybody isn't the same. You're not all the same. You all have different, unique situations that's going on. So I could not give you general advice. So if you guys ever need to figure out what do you need to do as far as open up communication, if there's room for communication, you can always email me to set up a time to talk to me and ask me, like, what do we have to do for your specific situation? Okay, so whenever you guys get a chance, you can comment down in the comment section below, or you can email me at www.tyrewilson.com. I was able to communicate with Tiffany, and it was the hardest thing I had to do because I couldn't do it. I felt like I couldn't do it without letting out the frustration and the anger that I have. But when Tiffany talked to me and more so listened to what I had to say, she only put out there, I only want to listen to what it is that you have to say, and don't be afraid. Say what you need to say. Now, that was some work on Tiffany's part. I can't take any credit for that because those were the things I felt like was the issue between us in the first place. I couldn't communicate with her if she was unwilling to listen to me, and I couldn't communicate without blowing up at her. So because I used to be so frustrated with the fact that I would be shut down in the middle of a conversation with her because of the way I presented my conversation and the way I permitted my body language and stuff like that, which, you know, we could talk about and get through and go over things like that as well. So she listened, and I didn't complain. I vented my feelings and my thoughts to her as far as how all of a sudden this lapse in affection and this lapse in openness had me worried about like our relationship all over again, how things just felt like they did, 2 or 3 years ago. And I just, I let her know, like, at a point, it makes me not want to trust you. How can you go so hard for me? How can you go so hard in our relationship for a few weeks? And then there's, it feels like that same energy isn't there, week 3 or week 4 or something like that. And I'm like, well, maybe you were doing all of that to throw me off. Maybe you were doing all that to make me drop my guard. I told you guys, it could very well be an issue with that. But if I'm the one that's going to talk about bringing up old unresolved issues, then I've already predetermined that no matter what Tiffany does, she's up to no good. And to be honest with you, when you're in a restored marriage, there comes a point where your spouse wants to work things out with you. But if you take that opportunity and turn it on its backside, and you decide to attack your spouse for all the time you had to stand for your marriage, you're going to make things so much worse. And it will take, quite honestly, a divine intervention, and it's going to take much patience on your partner's, on their side, in order to have to really deal with what's going on between the both of you. So, not warning you, I'm just making you aware. You have to be aware of these things. So anyway, I went ahead and I said what I needed to say, and I vented, and I felt terrible because I felt like I really just dumped all over Tiffany. And I felt terrible, so I shut down for a few days, which is probably why I had the extended break with the podcast. But you know what? She was kind and caring and decided to just only listen to what it is that I had to say. She didn't try to come up with an answer for anything because she understood, and this is what she told me before going to work, she understood that it was coming from a place of fear. It was coming from a place of having an unresolved issue. It was coming because not that she had not found a way to make me feel better about us, but the fact that I refused to let go of how I felt back then. I refused to still let go of what could happen or what might happen. And for a man, it's a real place, but it's terrible at the same time for your relationship. So that's really like, it's kind of venomous. It's kind of cancerous to your relationship. And I don't credit the enemy for any of that, because that's something I did to myself, right? If I'm willing to throw away everything that we worked on for a feeling or an unresolved issue that I clearly had the power to take care of, then my issues does not belong to, it doesn't belong to Lucifer. It doesn't belong to the enemy. I'm sorry. He's not getting any more of that credit. I have to take responsibility and accountability for how I think, for how I speak, for how I behave, not only because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the smart thing to do. It's smart to deal with your unresolved issues. It's smart to take a break from things if you need to give yourself some grace, because I tell you what, everything that you do experience, that is from God, and it's only an opportunity for you to learn from. You've got to learn from what has happened. You cannot rebuke and reject everything. Some things that God brings into your life, you got to go through. You had to go through those things, just like standing for your marriage. It's just like standing up for your manhood, your womanhood, for your family, for your own self-worth. You had to go through this, and you've got to figure out a way to turn it into your power, because that is what it's meant for. It's meant to be turned into your own power, something that you can learn and impart onto others with. So it was tough. I'm not going to say it was easy. It's not easy, and that's good. It's not supposed to be easy. Think about like what's easy, to kind of turn on and turn off your emotions, to turn off and turn on how motivated you are one day versus how unmotivated you are the next day. It has nothing to do with that. There's no motivation with any of these things. Motivation will fail you at some point. Your own willpower will fail you at some point, but your discipline can get you through. Now, how do you get through with discipline? It takes practice, and it takes time. You need to give yourself time to really process the thoughts, your actions, and your choices. What do you choose to do now that you have all this information at the tip of your fingers? What are you going to do with all that information? You have to process and codify that information. You have to find out how it works for you. And if you need to, it's time to get on the phone and talk to a professional. It's time to get on the phone and speak to a therapist. It's time to get on the phone and talk to a good friend, a mentor, a coach. I don't care who you reach out to. But when your car is down, you take it to a mechanic. When your teeth need to get fixed, you go to a dentist. When your kids are acting up in school, you probably get a call from the teacher or the principal. You see, you got to call the right people for the right job. God is on call 24/7, 365 for the rest of our lives, because there are certain situations that we get into we haven't necessarily processed, and we don't know how to deal with it, and we look for comfort in the Word of God, and that is amazing. However, at some point, it's not the enemy. You don't have to give the enemy any more credit. Sometimes it's just unresolved issues in you. There's nothing wrong for reaching out for help. It's nothing wrong with reaching out to the right people for help. And you should get started as soon as you can, because just like your car and your kids and your teeth and your health, your mental health is just as important. Without this, this runs rampant. It runs rampant, and it's affected by the choices that you make, the people you surround yourself from, the influence that you actually process through your auditory senses. Without this is open to attack. And the only one that might be attacking you is you. So, any unresolved issues that you guys have, I encourage you to take the time to really process them, to understand that they are unresolved issues, that maybe you are okay right now, but if you feel like you cannot find a way to bring yourself back or to find a way out, then I am encouraging you guys. I'm encouraging you to get on the computer, hit the Googles, and understand that you can reach out to people who are trained and who are willing to help you. So, make sure you guys take care of yourselves. It doesn't matter how many people you have to call. You are still God's greatest creation, one of God's greatest creations. Let's put it that way. And you are here to spread the word, the good word. And we need to be able to do that with a clear mind. With a clear mind, all right, and an open heart. All right, you guys, that's going to do it for today. If you can so willingly, please hit a like, share, subscribe. You can rate the podcast over on iTunes and Spotify, Google, and Stitcher, I believe. Always open to leaving questions, concerns, comments. Send a voice message. I'll leave a link down in the description. And I want to thank you guys again for being here. I think we're at 341 subscribers. And I remember being at 12 for like a year. So 341 subscribers. Hopefully, that number is going to grow. But I thank each and every one of you who are here. Shout out to members of the podcast who have subscribed. I can't wait to hear more from you guys. And I can't wait to share more interesting podcast topics with you. Until next time, you guys have a safe day.